Welcome to the Unknown Webcast, and as always, in case you haven't figured it out, I am so conservative that I have trouble turning left even when I'm driving. This is broadcast number 26, and we'll be talking with former Jehovah's Witness Cynthia Hampton on this edition of the Unknown Webcast. Our topic tonight is exchanging false teachers. My name is Don Vino. I'm president of Midwest Christian Outreach, Inc. in Wonder Lake, Illinois, which produces the Unknown Webcast, and our senior researcher is Ron Hensel, who will introduce the sponsors of tonight's webcast. Ron.
Hello there. Greetings from hot, humid, sunny Florida, and all I care about now is that the Cubs are the best team in baseball. Our sponsor tonight is World's End Theology Outlet, your one-stop destination for dubious doctrines, half-baked heresies, and other notions whose time has gone. World's End Theology Outlet. Back to you, Don.
And it's good to be with you tonight, and it was warm here as well. Cynthia Hampton is a fine young lady that I met some years ago at the Witnesses Now for Jesus convention. Her and her husband Dave would come there. In fact, Dave was kind of ran the sound for them for several years. And I thought it would be good to have Cynthia on here because she had been a Jehovah's Witness who left and became a Christian. So what is it that happened to her? What is kind of her life story? And she was gracious enough to consent to doing that. By the way, you are also part of a Christian Apologetics Alliance as well, right? Women in Apologetics?
Yes, I'm part of that group. So
okay.
It encourages women to get involved with apologetics and, to go on speaking in different places.
Right. So if someone wants to have you speak, you are...
I'm available.
You're available.
I'm available on Jehovah's Witnesses. And anything else I can think of.
Yeah, exactly. So let's start in the beginning. How about if we start in the beginning? You had mentioned that in your growing up years, your family was involved with reading Edgar Cayce, and that you have been kind of caught up using Ouija boards and things and occultism. As I read that, I was a little surprised. I didn't really know your history that far back. But my mother was very involved in reading Edgar Cayce, and her best friend was a practicing witch. And she would frequently go and get her fortune told and do her astrology and things like that. It seemed like that was sort of the thing to do in the 1960s. And then to my shock and amazement, as Ron and I were talking earlier tonight, he mentioned that his mother was also involved in reading Edgar Cayce. And how does she justify that again?
Oh, well, he was a Presbyterian Sunday school teacher. He was, what wasn't he called, the sleeping prophet?
The sleeping prophet,
They were kind of like trances that he would go into. Now, later on, my mom, I think, shied away from all that stuff. But at the time, it was really, I mean, you had Edgar Cayce, you had Jean Dixon. I think she was probably, I mean, Cayce was dead by the time he became popular. I mean, it's like, that's when I'm going to become popular, by the way. I'm going to be dead. That makes me popular. A lot easier to be around. It's Jean Dixon, she was in the news a lot. I mean, it's like every tabloid had Jean Dixon's predictions for, the coming year or whatever. Says you were also into tarot cards, lots of astrology. So joining the Watchtower Society must have really put the brakes on all that stuff.
Yes, it did. Well, we were Catholic, We thought we were good Catholics before, and I had gone through of course, baptized as a baby, and got confirmed and made my first Holy Communion and did all that. But in the meantime, my father and I believe my grandfather as well, they were reading Edgar Cayce, and so they were into you know, prophecy and everything. And so my aunt, also my father's sister, was into a lot of astrology and astrology books. And so we had astrology books around the house. We had a lot of stuff that would be considered New Age. We had books on like visualization and you know, I read books on, you know, trying to have out of body experiences, all that kind of stuff. That, of course, you know, as a Christian, is totally out of the question. But I thought it was really cool back then, and I, you know, used a Ouija board. I had another kind of a spirit board that used a pendulum, and of course, reading tarot cards. And I wanted to be psychic, and I wanted to be able to tell the future. You know, I wanted to be able to help people in a way so that, you know, I could tell their future and help them with what they needed to do. So that's kind of the background on what was going on with my family. My mother, in about 1969 or so, 1970, became interested in Jehovah's Witnesses from another friend. And my mother's friend brought over Jehovah's Witnesses materials, you know, which talked about, you know, the end times and Armageddon, and, you know, pretty soon we were saying, you know, of course we found out that, you know, about the prediction of 1975 would be the end. And so we were kind of ripe for that, I believe, because of what Edgar Cayce was saying.
Yeah, let me ask you a question now. Let's go back to Edgar Cayce for a second, and the occult and your Roman Catholic background. This just occurred to me. Do you think, as a former Roman Catholic, and Ron, maybe you can weigh in on this, kind of a theological perspective, do you think that Roman Catholicism lends itself to involvement in sort of spiritism and occult activity?
I don't think so.
I think it depends. I don't think the theology of Catholicism lends itself to that. I think that the culture, especially now, we're talking post-Vatican II. I can't really speak for pre-Vatican II. That was around 19. The Council of Vatican II ended in 65. It started in 63, I think, and went on for a couple of years. And you really, it was a huge change in the church, a new openness, a new, you know, they started, you know, implementing, I mean, the Mass in the vernacular, the doing away with women's head coverings in worship, and there was just one of the things, though, that Catholicism has historically had is they have not rooted out superstition in the lives of the congregation members. So going back for centuries, you would find during the Middle Ages, astrology was very commonly practiced in many Catholic countries, and it was kind of like you know, a novelty. I'm told that even Martin Luther's right-hand man, Philip Melanchthon, dabbled in astrology, and Luther used to make fun of him for that. So even during the Reformation, there were some people who thought, well, you know, maybe there's something to this. But you do see there's a lot of superstition among Roman Catholics. There are a lot of people burying statues of St. Joseph underground in their backyard to get their house to sell. And that's not something that happened after Vatican II. That's been going on for a long time. So you have, you know, that, and it just kind of, I think when the openness of Vatican II came, it kind of lent itself to, for many Catholics, just, hey, why don't we try this? Why don't we look at that? Why don't we be open-minded? The church is opening up. The church is loosening up.
Okay, so then for Cynthia's family to be Roman Catholic and involved in some of this occult and odd things from Edgar Cayce, the sleeping prophet, is not all that uncommon. They sort of are were popular within Roman Catholicism and in culture in general.
Well, I think that's the key there is that, American Catholics are swept along with many of the same cultural trends and fads that everybody else is, and you have Catholics who are really, really knowledgeable about their theology, and then you have Catholics who are very faithful in terms of their regular attenders, but they don't necessarily get that deep into the theology. And in fact, really, I mean, Cynthia, were you catechized as a Roman Catholic? Did they take you through like the Baltimore Catechism or anything like that?
I went to catechism classes till about, the 6th grade or so, but I don't think I went after the 6th grade.
Did you use a traditional catechism, like a question and answer format, like the Baltimore Catechism, where they asked you a question, you had to memorize the answer?
I don't remember. I know we had books, and they were, made for children, but I don't remember exactly what they were.
We had CCD. Is that what you called it?
CCD, yes. Yes.
Yeah.
CCD, that's what it was.
They tended to move away from catechizing in the traditional sense. They might call it catechism, but traditional catechism was very much grounded in here's what you are supposed to believe, and you go down all these different items, and one, spiritism and all that. I haven't checked the Baltimore Catechism, but the more contemporary Roman Catholic one, I'm sure, probably warns people away from.
That could be. Okay, so around 1969, then you said your mother came home with some books about Jehovah's Witnesses.
No, she met up with a friend of hers. We happened to run into this lady that we knew who had been Catholic, and we ran into her at the grocery store, and pretty soon she started witnessing to my mother, and we didn't know that she had become a Jehovah's Witness. And in fact, she was a little bit deceptive. Well, she was a lot deceptive about who she was representing, because the last time I had seen her, she had been a catechism teacher and at the church we went to. So when we saw her at the grocery store, she started talking about the Bible and the time of the end and all sorts of strange things that at the time that I thought that was very, very strange for her to talk about. And then she started a study with my mother, and I asked my mother, I said, well, what religion does she belong to? Because I remember she used to teach over at St. Peter and Paul, and she was teaching catechism there. And my mother says, she hasn't told me yet. And I said, well, let me see the books. So I saw, the truth that leads to eternal life, and I opened it up. It says, the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society. And I said, well, I think that's Jehovah's Witnesses. And my mom says, I think so too, but she hasn't told me that's what it is.
It's kind of like I remember a long time ago asking a Jehovah's Witness if they were a Jehovah's Witness. I kind of got a similar response to asking someone if they sold Amway. The response, when I asked somebody, when I asked somebody, are you selling Amway? The first thing they would ask me is, well, what have you heard about Amway? It's like because they know there's some kind of reputation there. And in Jehovah's Witnesses, in my youth, my earliest recollection of even hearing the term, the name Jehovah's Witness, was when my dad was talking about it, and he was very negative. He had had some experiences, and some friends had had some experiences with overly aggressive, what they felt were overly aggressive Jehovah's Witnesses. This would have been the early 70s. And I had never really heard of these people at that time. Later, the doorbell rang one morning, and sure enough, one of them shows up at my door, and that phrase was echoing in my, my dad's words were echoing in my head, about these people, and and sure enough, this fella turned out to be pretty aggressive. I was trying to be polite. I wanted to get back to my Saturday morning cartoon on TV. Really, is what happened. I said, well, really, I'm not really. I shouldn't really talk to you. I stumbled, and I didn't want to tell him, my dad hates your guts, but I basically said, my dad doesn't like Jehovah's Witnesses, or something like that came out, and he goes, well, don't your parents let you think for yourself? And as soon as he said that, I thought he'd crossed the line with me personally. And not only that, but right at that moment, my dad was at the top of the stairs in his pajamas. Who is it? And I kind of gently closed the door partially behind me, and I said, I think it's a Jehovah's Witness. He goes, shut the door. And the guy, he heard my dad clear through the door, and he was like, I could just see him shuffling his papers and getting ready to leave, He didn't need a goodbye. And then my dad died, unfortunately, not too long after that, and I was in school. Actually, before that happened, I had been in school with people my age who were Jehovah's Witnesses, and they told me about this 1975 thing. And I wondered at the time, I've been wondering ever since, was that why this guy and so many at that time were so aggressive and wouldn't take no for an answer? Because I've noticed since then they're not quite the same. I haven't encountered any overt rudeness, but back then, I have to admit, there was this edge. There was this, not just a kind of a pushiness, but an edge to the way they talked. And it seemed to have something to do, later on, I wondered, I should say, if it had something to do with the fact that they believed, hey, Armageddon's right around the corner. We better get going here. Am I relating anything that you relate to?
Oh, yes. Well, I think that, back then they were in a panic because 1975 was coming, and after I got into it and everything, I remember them saying, and it was written in the Watchtower, or it was written in one of the books that they had, The Nation Shall Know I'm Jehovah. I remember that book, and it's said that if we we're going door to door, and if we were to miss anybody, that didn't hear the good news because of us, because we missed their house, or we missed doing a back call return visit to them, that their blood would be on our hands at Armageddon, and therefore we would not make it through Armageddon.
Really? That's a lot of guilt.
Yeah.
That's kind of heavy. That's wow. So, and then the weird thing is that just a few years later, of course, Armageddon doesn't happen. 1975 comes and goes, and I'm starting to hear from Jehovah's Witnesses I meet that, oh, well, that was a misunderstanding. The society never really taught that. The organization was just misunderstood. Or there were some people, I loved it. I kept hearing that one over and over. Yeah, there were some people who took it a little too far,
Right. Or they said, the brothers were so excited about the time of the end. So they were the ones who were saying all that, the ones that were getting overly excited.
Oh, okay, which was just about everybody, really.
Pretty much.
just those few million there. So, I mean, when you went through that, I mean, I don't remember what year you came out, but what was that like for you, the before, the during, and the after? Do you remember 1975 fairly vividly?
Yeah, I sure do. Yeah, well, I was wondering, when it was going to come, Armageddon was going to come. I thought, well, for sure it was going to come October 1st, 1975, and it didn't ever show up. So I thought, well, then everyone was saying, well, maybe they're a year off, so it'll be in 1976. And so nothing happened in 1976, and nothing happened in 1977. And then by that time, I was starting to think, what's going on here? Here they had us all built up for 1975, for Armageddon, and nothing's happening, and it's getting to 1978. I finally enrolled in college.
Oh, well, that's not very good.
I know. I was really a bad girl enrolling in college, and one of the elders' wives told me that because I was taking a Psychology 101 class, that I was learning doctrines of demons, and that I needed to drop the class. I said, well, it's a required class, so I'm not going to drop it. And so I was kind of marked from then on. And so finally, when I kind of started to not go to the meetings as much anymore because, I had classes. But the whole thing was I really wasn't very interested in it because by that time I was learning to do some critical thinking, and I noticed that everything written in the Watchtower month after month after month was pretty much the same thing.
How old were you at that point then?
In 1978, I was 22.
Okay.
Because I was 20 in 1976. Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
So you went to college later. I mean, you graduated high school the year after Armageddon was supposed to be there. You're probably, watching the ball. Go ahead.
No. I got married in 1974 when I was 18. And
you're 18 in 74.
Yeah,
okay.
I was 18.
So,
well, at that time they were saying that there might not be marriage in the new system. So a whole bunch of kids, they were all getting married as teenagers.
Wow.
And I was
Really?
one of them because they said that if we weren't, if we were to make it through Armageddon as a single person, we probably wouldn't be able to get married because there wouldn't be marriage in the new system.
I didn't know
what happens
that.
if you're already, so there's no marriage in the Paradise Earth.
Right, there wouldn't be any new marriages, but they said if you were already married, you could remain married. But if it was that you came through Armageddon as a single person, let's say you were 16, 18 years old when Armageddon happened, if you fall in love in the Paradise Earth, forget it. You can't get married.
So some paradise, eh?
Yeah,
So,
really.
So
that's why
so you had a rash of marriages in 1974 to make sure that you could be married when you get into the Paradise on Earth. Oh,
right.
interesting.
But I married a really bad guy, so.
Oh.
So it's a good thing Armageddon didn't happen then.
I married a really bad guy, so I ended up divorcing him. And when I was 20, so I was divorced at 20 and decided to go back to school to try to learn something.
Okay, so
yeah.
So far you've traded your tarot cards for watchtowers.
For the Watchtower, yes.
And 1975 came and went. You were married in preparation to have a husband in the Paradise on Earth, which turned out it didn't happen, and it was good because it wouldn't have been paradise for this particular individual probably anyway. So you're starting to have some doubts. You're in college and doing some critical thinking. So what happened next? You don't seem like the kind of person to me that takes kind of sort of eternal issues lightly. What caused you to start thinking differently about the Watchtower?
I think it was because I was beginning to notice that everything in the Watchtower just seemed the same. And it was the same thing month after month after month. And so it seemed that before 1975, we were always looking for new light. Always looking for new light. And as I examined the Watchtower, I said, well, there is no new light. It's the same thing as last month. and it began to just be very boring for me. So I started to fade away, and I disassociated myself in 1980 without knowing that there was really anything wrong with the Watchtower. I had no idea about the false prophecies, had no idea about the false teachings, had no idea that, you know, all their teachings conflicted with what the Bible really said, because I was so used to reading the Scripture out of context as they taught it. So after I left in 1980, I went back to kind of like a New Age kind of thing, and you know, I stopped believing in the Watchtower pretty much, but then I kind of switched over back to a New Age mentality.
Hmm.
So that's what I did for
So,
2 years.
Okay, so you just this is interesting. What kind of new light had you been accustomed to? What were some examples of the new light that used to get you so excited before it went away after 1975?
You know, I can't remember. I can't give you really specifics on it. We were always looking for something pre-1975 that would tell us something more about what was going to happen. You know,
Okay.
but we never.
Now,
we never really did find it.
so basically, you're looking for more blanks to be filled in about this whole Armageddon thing, and when they told you different pieces of information, like you can't get married after the Paradise Earth is started, that would have been maybe an example of new light. And then, well, this is interesting because I'm wondering how much of your experience is a symptom of what was going on in the Brooklyn headquarters. I mean, they must have been wondering, well, what do we tell them now? And somebody raised their hand and said, well, why don't we just recycle what we've been telling them until we figure out. I mean, because they must have realized that people were going to have questions, and they must have been getting some of those questions. And what can you do? You're busy trying to figure out what to do about that, and you're too busy to come up with any new ideas to put in print. And look at how well the last big idea worked out for you, Armageddon.
Armageddon didn't get there.
Maybe we should just keep saying the old stuff and hope that nobody notices. But you noticed, and you got bored. And this is a time when a lot of people are leaving the Watchtower Society. Did you notice that too? Did you feel like you were all alone leaving them, or did you even care?
I felt like I was all alone leaving them because I didn't notice anybody leaving, at least not from the Kingdom Hall that I went to. And it seemed like everybody was still around. So I had no idea that there was anybody else who was questioning the Watchtower. You know, my mother made me feel like a very bad girl because I was questioning things, and because I was being unfaithful to the Watchtower, and you know, I was basically doing my own thing at the time. So that's basically what was going on. And then when I, you know, left in February 1980, I wrote a letter of disassociation, and at that time, a few people started to shun me, but most of my family didn't. And then when they put the hammer down on when you're a disassociated person, they said you have to treat them like a disfellowship person and not speak to them. They really put the hammer down on that. And then by 1981, 82, no one was speaking to me anymore.
No family members, no nothing.
Right, because I had family that had joined the organization. And that was my mother and my brother. Unfortunately, my sister, she got disfellowship the same year that I left, so I always had my sister, and today she's a Christian. So then my aunt and my cousins, and so there was, and now they're still in, except for the ones who have died. And unfortunately, I had one cousin who died as a Jehovah's Witness, and he died from leukemia in 1998, refusing blood transfusions that could have kept him alive longer, at least long enough to have some chemotherapy and extend his life. but he died 6 weeks after his diagnosis.
Uh,
All right, Ron, we probably, it's about time to hear from our sponsor for tonight.
yes, we really should. So let's hear from our friends at World's End Theology Outlet. And they have a product that is designed to solve a problem. You know what that problem is. That problem is men's hairstyles have gone downhill at your Kingdom Hall. Well, what's the reason? Well, it's because misunderstandings have arisen from the New World Translation revision. What to do about it? Well, it's time to get back to basics. The solution is to grease your head with classic New World Translation hair oil, available at World's End Theology Outlet. This takes us back to the older version of the New World Translation, where we have such fine verses as, "With oil you have greased my head." Well, how are we supposed to obey that? Well, we have to use classic New World Translation hair oil. It is based on the old light of the original New World Translation and is available this week at World's End Theology Outlet. Back to you, Don.
With oil, you have greased my head. Sometimes the New World Translation is something you have to read just to see how odd they get.
It's bizarre. Yeah, it's like, and sometimes that way of talking spills over into, well, the I don't know how much of it's in the translation itself. You have, you know, you never hear a Jehovah's Witness refer to his church. You hear, it's always my organization or the organization, and they will, even when talking about to other people about their churches, a lot of times they'll talk about your organization instead. So there's this, you know, not using normal language. You kind of
Right. They have their own language, and we even have had some of that tonight. For example, when Cynthia talked about looking for new light, for the uninitiated are going to go, well, what does that exactly mean? When you say new light, what does that mean to you as a Jehovah's Witness?
New revelation, new information about what's going to happen, about the future. You know, there are more prophecy, you know, because we were listening. This was the faithful and discreet slave. It was supposed to be, you know, God's prophet.
there's another term, the faithful and discreet slave. You know, I mean, I think in most translations it's the faithful and wise servant. But it's almost as though they deliberately, it's like when they're supposedly translating this version, and I don't believe for a minute they translated, I don't believe there was a single person who really knew Greek or Hebrew, really at translation level in the Watchtower Society. You can see, so what they're doing apparently is they have a Bible and then they have a dictionary next to it, and let's see what other words we can fill in here. You know, we know the word doulos can mean slave. Here it's translated servant. Well, let's just always translate it slave. That way we can make our translation sound different. And it seems like that was the main goal, was to make it different, in my opinion.
Well, I think that's true, but they also do things like giving new meaning to passages. This new light, for example, comes from Proverbs
4:18.
4:18, right?
Yes.
Now I'll read it from the English Standard Version. It says, "The path of the righteous is like the light of dawn, which shines brighter and brighter until full day." The next verse, though, says, "The way of the wicked is like darkness. They do not know over what they stumble." And so the Watchtower uses this as what we refer to as the new light excuse. And that is, sometimes you're looking for new prophecy to come from them as a Jehovah's Witness, but more often than not, it's an actual change in teaching, but somehow they have to make it sound credible. What do I mean by that? Well, we've had the official Watchtower line on whatever the topic is going to be. Let's say uh, on Romans 13, the understanding of Romans 13. Uh,
Hmm.
and at one time it's the government. Another time it's something else. And so they have this new light that comes out that gives them an increased understanding, which usually is diametrically opposed to whatever the previous understanding was. The men of Sodom, they've had 8 positions on that. The men of Sodom will be resurrected, yes. The men of Sodom will be resurrected, no. The men of Sodom will be resurrected, yes. Depends on which publication and at what time that you read it. And so when we look at the text, though, Proverbs 4, it tells us a couple of things. One is it really isn't talking about new revelation, rather that your way becomes clearer as you are going down this path. And it would look kind of like this: if you're walking along the road, let's say, and you look down the road and you see a structure of some kind, and you go, that looks like a building. And you walk farther, and the light gets brighter, and you notice that it's a 10-story building. And you walk farther, and the light gets brighter, and you can deduce that it's a 10-story building with copper windows. And you walk farther, and the light gets brighter, and you recognize it's a 10-story window with copper-tinted windows and a sign above it. That's the light getting brighter. The Watchtower seems to me fits the next verse, that they don't know what they're studying. Because they're walking down the road and they look at something, a structure, and they go, it looks like an outhouse. And as they walk farther, they decide, no, it's actually a man on a motorcycle. And then they walk a little farther down the road and they think, no, it's a swimming pool with a palm tree next to it. They never actually know what it is.
Exactly. And I remember some of the new light that came out, they had their teaching on transplants. And we knew somebody who was experiencing blindness due to a corneal disease, and he needed a corneal transplant. Well, for years, this man was not allowed to get a corneal transplant until the Watchtower changed its teaching on getting transplants. So after I can't remember what year they finally approved getting corneal transplants, but he suffered for many years with going blind because of a corneal disease. So that's another example of the new light that came in. You had to wait for their new light in order to take care of yourself and your health.
Right, because those kind of transplants in the 1950s and early 1960s were considered cannibalism.
Exactly.
If transfusions are drinking blood, why can't transplants be cannibalism? I mean, and now, so what does that make hair transplants? I mean, you gotta wonder sometimes. So, like, when you were, okay, you went from New Age, well, kind of ESP New Age to, it wasn't called New Age in the 60s, Age of Aquarius, let's call it that.
Age of Aquarius, right, yeah.
And then...
we're gonna go into song here. I can feel it coming.
Let the sun shine. and then you have Watchtower, doctrine, and then you're back into the New Age with all those folks, Claire Prophet and whatever. And
Elizabeth Claire Prophet, right?
Yeah, and then is it from there that you become a Christian eventually?
Well, I was pretty New Agey for about 1980 to 1982, and I had this friend that kept inviting me to church, but I really wasn't interested. He kept inviting me to church, and finally, to appease him, I went to church, and it was my first time in a evangelical type of church. I wasn't used to it because I'd only been in the Catholic Church in the Kingdom Hall. So it was kind of scary because when we were in the Watchtower, we were always told that if you entered a church, that something bad was going to happen to you. You know, like a story of someone who entered a church who was a Jehovah's Witness, had a chandelier fall on their head, and they died immediately because Jehovah was so upset with them for going into a church.
That reminds me, I had a boss once who said her dad never went to church when she was growing up. They always asked, why don't you go to church with us, Daddy? And he said, well, if I did, you know, I've led such a bad life that the ceiling would fall in on me. And one time they got him to go to church, and sure enough, there'd been some plaster work done that was, and something got, and when he walked through the door, the ceiling actually fell on him at that point, and it became a family joke.
Funny.
So this really, what you've just said, though, brings up in my mind something that I have heard from other Jehovah's Witnesses, that it's like you've left the Kingdom Hall, but the Kingdom Hall hasn't left you, at least not completely. You've left the Watchtower, but you're still carrying a lot of Watchtower around in your head or inside of you, and so this is baggage, right? This is
right.
You know,
well, I was afraid of churches, but I wasn't afraid of astrology. I mean, I went right back to reading my horoscope and reading astrology books, and I had a lot of New Age type of stuff I was doing, you know, where you would lie down and relax and cleanse your mind, and, you know, then, you know, listen to this New Age music while somebody was kind of like giving you instructions, so I could go into a hypnotic trance. I mean, I went back to doing this kind of stuff.
Wow.
For 2 years, and so I wasn't afraid of that. I was afraid of churches. I was afraid.
Did the Watchtower actually warn you more about churches than it did about New Age stuff? Is that maybe why, or what?
Well, there's a lot of things in Watchtower literature, Ron, that paints the church up as the whore of Babylon, world empire of false religions, and there's actually demons in the church that will jump on you when you go to the church. I'll never forget, we had one of our first experiences with meeting with Jehovah's Witnesses, and they're coming out, a husband who had doubts contacted us and managed to persuade his wife to come and talk with us. Well, when she got there, before she came in the house, she stood outside and she kind of looked around the house. She wandered around looking, trying to figure out if she could see where the demons were hiding that were going to jump on her when they came to the house.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, I could have told her the answer to that, though. You know, she just asked me. I'll tell her exactly where the demons are. I've been to your house. Well, actually, I haven't been to your new one, but.
So Cynthia, so you could go back to astrology, you could go back to New Age kinds of things. So you exchanged the false teachings of Edgar Cayce and tarot cards for the false teachings of the Watchtower, and then you traded those in back for your New Age stuff without too much of a problem, but were fearful of going to a church.
Right. I was very afraid of going to church. Yeah, like you said, you know, I thought, you know, some demons would come out at me. I wasn't afraid of demons with the New Age, and that's where the demons really are.
That's kind of weird, yeah. I only associate demons with people who talk about Jesus. You know, people who talk about spirits, that doesn't make sense. I don't see why you would make that connection.
But, you know, I thought they were good spirits in the New Age. I thought, you know, they were helpful spirits. And I thought that,
too much Rocky and Bullwinkle there.
Yeah. Hey, Rocky. Well, anyways, the thing is, okay, so let me tell you a story about a friend of mine who left the Watchtower Society around 1976 or so because of, it had something to do with the failed prophecy of 75, and he was kind of like just floating out there. He was kind of just trying to get on with his life, and then one day he runs into some Christians who are witnessing on a street corner, and they say, hey, have you heard about Jesus? And do you know who he is? And they say, yeah, he's the Archangel Michael who, took on a human body and paid for the sin of Adam, and was resurrected a spirit creature, and these Christians looked at him and they go, oh my, we have a lot to talk about with you. They actually got him to go into a restaurant and have a cup of coffee, and showed him from the Bible. It started him on a long journey, but he'd been out of the Watchtower for a while, and he was still carrying much of, maybe most of the Watchtower doctrine in his head. How much of that, when they started talking about the Trinity at your evangelical church that you were visiting, or if they ever mentioned that Jesus was God in human form, how did you react when you started hearing those things?
I didn't notice it at first. In fact, what happened was on the first time I went to church there, I met an ex-witness.
Oh, okay.
So that's what kind of started me on my journey into becoming a Christian, because I met this ex-witness who was, she was a woman who, her husband was the cousin of, the guy that wrote Apocalypse Delayed, Jim Penton's wife.
Okay.
Yeah, so they had that connection to Jim Penton, and she was the one who started showing me, and she pulled out, I went to her house and she showed me the Watchtower, and she would show me the Bible, and she goes, no, see, this Watchtower teaching is incorrect, and she started showing me a few of the false prophecies. And then the one thing that hit me the most was the fact that it was on the April 1st, 1979 Watchtower, it was questions from readers, and it said that Jesus was only mediator for 144,000. And when I read that and I thought about that, and I said, no, that can't be, because I knew what the Scripture said he was mediator for all. But the Watchtower is saying he's only really mediator for 144,000. And so it kind of, everything from then on just clicked. And
Wow.
I became, I started learning about Christianity then, and shortly after that I gave my heart to Christ.
One of the things that always intrigued me, and I'm not sure how, it's been a long time. We're talking 40 years, right, for you that you've been out of the Watchtower. How much of what they taught do you remember? So Don might pipe in here. The idea that
I didn't bring my pipe. I'm sorry.
You didn't bring your pipe, okay? your bagpipes I was talking about. You might pipe in on us. Well, anyways, I am told that the Watchtower teaches its people that the Bible was written to the 144,000. Was only written really for them.
Right.
So okay, you remember that. So then, doesn't that cause problems when you're actually dealing with verses? Like, for instance, when John says, I'm writing to you who believe that Jesus is the Son of God, and then, he's writing to you. So how is that just the 144,000? Seems to me like he's writing to everyone who believes in the name of Jesus.
Yeah, so it doesn't make sense if he's only speaking to 144,000.
But now the thing is, what John says next in that verse is, I'm writing these things so that you may know that you have eternal life. Did you ever know that you had eternal life when you were in the Watchtower?
No, because again, as she pointed out, in 1979, the Watchtower said the Bible, not only that Jesus was the anointed, or was the mediator, only for the 144,000. So the Bible was only written to the 144,000. It's an organizational book. Jesus is the mediator only for the 144,000, and the Watchtower goes on to say that the other sheep, their salvation is dependent solely on how they treat the anointed. So they did not know if they had salvation. Only the anointed would.
Right. It was basically having a good relationship with the anointed.
So
not with Jesus.
So Jesus did not die for you as a Jehovah's Witness. He only died for the anointed. Is that what they would
Right.
say?
Yes. Yes,
Yeah,
that's what
interesting.
they believe. That's what it turns out to be.
That's a really limited atonement, isn't it, Don?
Well, it's it's
Talk about
actually even
Calvinism,
more.
That's
It's
really
even
limited
more
atonement.
limited. It's even more limited than that. Jesus died as a corresponding ransom to Adam's sin. So Jesus died essentially to offset what Adam did and give everyone else the opportunity then to work their way into salvation. He's a mediator for the 144,000, who in turn are the mediator for everybody else. By the way, Cynthia, Sally Peterson writes in that they were instructed not to tell people they were Jehovah's Witnesses, but simply to say that they were, quote, Bible students, unquote, in the neighborhood, and wanted to share a scripture. Was that your experience as well?
Yeah, that's what we would say at the door most of the time, that we were Bible students. We were practicing deceptive methods of trying to recruit.
Right.
Because, the name Jehovah's Witnesses was a turnoff, but if you said Bible students, I guess that was supposed to make people feel better. I don't know.
Oh, kind of seeker-friendly Jehovah's Witness tactic there, right?
Yes.
All right. So back to the salvation issue, Ron. I can see you're intrigued by this, because the Watchtower, they don't actually come out in like one book and give you their soteriology, their doctrine of salvation. What they do is give you new light, introducing new concepts from time to time periodically, and you have to go through their literature to actually figure out what it is that they're teaching. This is one of those areas, because as Cynthia pointed out, you can read the Bible and you can see, well, Jesus seems to be the mediator for everybody, right? That's what you find, that he died for the sins of the world, and yet they teach no, he's just the mediator for the 144,000. That's 1979. And then they teach that the Bible is an organizational book. It's only written to Jehovah's organization, and that's why you, as an average person, can't understand it. You have to have the Watchtowers under explanation, because Jehovah God tells the Watchtower what to print, to tell you what it means, and then the organization communicates it to the rank and file Jehovah's Witnesses, who in turn can tell others as they go door to door. Isn't that basically how things work?
Yeah, it goes through those filters.
Right. So you're going to a church, you're meeting with someone who is a former Jehovah's Witness who's taking you through the scripture, and then what happens next?
Well, I became a Christian, let's say May 1st, 1982, and after I accepted Christ, I went and told my father about it. He wasn't a witness yet. He had studied off and on, but he wasn't baptized. And but he was a believer in the Watchtower. He'd already been brainwashed, as I say, or under mind control, as the rest of the family was. And so he went ahead and told my mother, and my mother got very, very, very angry with me. And the next time I came over there, she said she wanted nothing more to do with me, and I was not to show up at their house anymore, because I was an apostate now, and I had gone back to the dog is like going back to the vomit, as the dog goes back to the vomit. She called me all these nasty words, and she was really angry with me. So I said okay, and I left, and she didn't speak to me for many, many years. And my aunt, my cousins, all my witness friends, they all, most of them just dropped me after they sometimes some of them would speak to me and be polite to me during the time that I had left and I was New Age. But the minute I became a born-again Christian, they wanted absolutely nothing to do with me. They just turned their backs on me.
That is an official teaching of the Watchtower, and in fact, World's End Theology Outlet has a new product that they've come out to help Jehovah's Witnesses and Kingdom Halls deal with this issue of apostates. Ron?
Yes, you need something to facilitate if you really want to get rid of people. Uh, so, people are struggling in the Kingdom Halls with this. And so our friends at World's End Theology Outlet ask us, do you struggle to find the time to deal with all the evil slaves in your midst? Do you need help in making examples out of those who question Jehovah's organization? Are there more apostates in your Kingdom Hall than you know what to do with? Well, millions now living will never fly out of your Kingdom Hall faster than with the left foot of disfellowship. Now, this is an amazing product. It's patented technology that automates the process. You line them up, it kicks them out. This product is so good that it was the winner of the 2015 Soul of the Organization Award. The left foot of disfellowship, available only at World's End Theology Outlet. Back to you, Don.
Okay, Cynthia, how does that for a new product?
I'm sure they'd love it.
But we made it sound funny, but it was probably pretty painful at the time, I would guess.
Being called an apostate and being told not from your mother that she never wanted to speak to you again, yes, that was very painful at the time. And my sister also experienced the shunning from our mother. We were talking about it the other day because right now my mother has dementia, Alzheimer's. She's 83 years old, and she is not remembering why she doesn't know her grandchildren. And she says, I don't remember any of these grandchildren. And, she remembers my firstborn, but she doesn't remember the other two, and she doesn't remember my sister's children. But when we tried to tell her, it's because you were shunning us at the time. And she goes, no, that couldn't be. She's kind of returned to the personality she used to have before she was a witness. But she can't remember all the shunning that she did and how she treated us. I mean, there was one time that I have another aunt who was not a Jehovah's Witness, and what my mother used to do was she used to call up another aunt, have her call me and say, oh, your mother's in town, she wants you to drop off your firstborn son over at Aunt Josie's house so she can see him. And I said, well, I'm not going to drop him off over there. I'm going to go over there with him. And so when I showed up over there, oh, she was so angry. When I would walk into a room, she'd walk out. That's how bad the shunning was.
That's really hard. And as I talk with Christians and try to explain to them and train them in how to try to reach Jehovah's Witnesses, I oftentimes have to almost start there to say, here is, you want to get them the gospel, which is exactly what we want to do. We want to see them leave the organization, become born again, to be redeemed by the blood of Christ, and have eternal life. But we don't always recognize the cost that Jehovah's Witnesses like yourself, are going to have to pay as a result of that decision, because you're going to be cut off from your family. We had one couple that we talked with some years ago. She was a fourth-generation Jehovah's Witness. He married into it and became a Jehovah's Witness. And as we talked with them and went through the scriptures with them and explained to them the deity of Christ and the Trinity, and they began recognizing how deceived the Watchtower had made them, their big question was, am I really willing to have my family cut us off? Because it was going to be, the day they made the decision, 64 family members would never speak to them again. That's a big price to pay. Yeah,
it's a big part of your life to just not have anymore, because your family is your support system in life, and it's horrible that so many ex-Jehovah's Witnesses commit suicide because of it.
Yeah.
It's very sad.
It is cruelty. It is it's abuse. It's cruelty, and it is it's just one more mark that they are a cult. One more sign that we're not dealing with a Christian denomination, a Christian religion. We're dealing with a cult, a very, very people die because of their membership. You just told us about someone you knew who died because he couldn't get a blood transfusion because of his leukemia.
Yeah, that was my cousin. That was my
Yeah.
cousin. My cousin Andy.
So for those who are watching this, if they wanted to communicate with you directly, should they try to contact you through us, or do you have some information that you would want them to have to be able to contact you directly?
Well, they can email me, Hampton_Cynthia@hotmail.com. They can find me on Facebook, Cynthia Hampton, Cynthia Velasco Hampton. So they can find me on Facebook. I do have a meetup group. So it's called Former Watchtower Followers in Los Angeles. So if they want to, contact me through Meetup, if they're interested, if they live in the Los Angeles area and would like to come to my support group, we meet once a month, last Sunday of the month, and they can sign up on Meetup. It's free, and I will give them all the information for the support group meetings.
What sort of things do you do at the Meetup group?
Well, it's basically a potluck that we have. We get together, we just talk. I keep it real informal. I always find that when you have food, people kind of open up and they gets them talking. And so that's what we do for the first hour. And the second hour, I usually have some kind of teaching or a guest speaker. Like in September, I'm going to have a psychologist who is actually a member of the church I go to. He's going to come in and talk about how to let go of your anger, because so many ex-Jehovah's Witnesses are very, very angry when they leave. They find out, the false prophecies. They're angry because, they've been disfellowshipped by their families. And so he's going to talk to them about the problem of anger and how to work out your anger.
Is Meetup a website?
Yeah, meetup.com. Yeah,
Okay.
so on there you can go search for my group, which is Former Watchtower Followers, or you can search it under ex-Jehovah's Witnesses. There's several ways you can find it on there.
Okay.
Good. All right, and we're going to have you back in the future, and we'll start talking about particular doctrines and because one of the things that I have, one of our supporters is just passionate. He lives in Florida, actually, about trying to reach Jehovah's Witnesses, and he's always intrigued and interested in talking to former Jehovah's Witnesses, looking for the silver bullet. What was it that caused you to start doubting and led you to the faith, and others? Because he's trying to find ways of communicating that Jehovah's Witnesses are going to be interested in hearing rather than fighting about. I don't know if there is such a thing.
I don't think there is. I don't think there is a silver bullet. It's different for everyone.
It is different for everyone because you get in for different reasons, you stay in for different reasons, and you leave for different reasons. But the more tools you can have kind of in your toolbox, the more opportunities you have to talk with people. So again, for those who are viewing, when you say you became a Christian, you accepted Christ, would you like to give us a short, here's what the gospel actually is, so that someone who's thinking about this can have some information to make a decision on what they want to do next?
Right. When I was in the Watchtower, it was all about following the Watchtower and learning their good news, about God's kingdom, about the new system, and about Armageddon. I found out that when I became a Christian, that Jesus died for my sins, that Jesus went to the cross, poured out his blood, and died, was in the grave for 3 days, and was resurrected. The miracle of the resurrection was just a whole new thing for me. As a Jehovah's Witness, we never talked about the resurrection. We had the once-a-year memorial of Christ's death, and then that's all there was to it. They never talked about the resurrection. But as a Christian, I learned the miracle that Jesus Christ came back from the dead, and he truly was the Savior. He truly was the Messiah, and he truly was our Redeemer. And that's the biggest difference, was that I really knew the real Jesus, not the phony Michael the Archangel Jesus that the Watchtower pushed on us.
Amen.
So if you confess with your mouth that Jesus is Lord, and in that context that he is God, and believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you will be saved. So you can accept the salvation he freely provided, because it is available to all those who call on his name. It's pretty clear. Cool. Cynthia, I am so glad you were on tonight. It's been helpful, hopefully to others as well. And we'll do something again down the road, just for fun, and hopefully to challenge believers to reach out to those who are involved with groups like the Jehovah's Witnesses, and to give them some tools to do that. And also for Jehovah's Witnesses who are considering what to do next, that they would contact you or us, and we can start answering other questions that they have along the way. So thank you, Cynthia. Ron,
Thank you.
we won't see you next week because we're going to take a 1 week off, and we will return the following week with Bill McKeever, and we're going to talk about changing marital issues within the Mormon Church and culture at large. So that'll be kind of fun. All right.
Okay.
Blessings, everybody. Talk to you in 2 weeks.
Thank you.
Let's give credit where credit is due on the way out.
Oh, yeah. Credit where credit is due.
Credit where credit is due. Okay. Well, our resident cult leader profiler is Neil before me. Our Jehovah's Witnesses coverage is provided by Armageddon and D. Opposer. Mormon Archives Manager is Polly Gummas. Our Liberal Denominations Bureau Chief is Lucy Goosey. Transgender issues coverage is provided by Ben Hur. Special correspondent for cults based on the Hindenburg disaster and flying turkeys, O.D. Humanity. Fact-checking supervisor, Yoleg Pulling. Technical assistance provided by Murky Research. Our legal advisors come from the law firm of Dewey, Cheatham, and Howe. Our grievance resolutions director is Giovanna Pisami. Director of Privacy Assurance is wiretapping. Our original idea sourcing comes from Drew A. Blank. The Unknown Webcast is a production of Midwest Christian Outreach, Inc. in cooperation with Emergency Manicure Productions. All of this is, we are strictly responsible for all of this content, but you will not be able to prove it in court. And we're back to you guys to say goodbye.
Well, and we welcome Emergency Manicure Productions and appreciate their assistance.
Yes, they've
See
been very
you
helpful.
all next time.